Hello, and welcome to the Link Podcast, the industry's link to learn, innovate, news, and knowledge in global supply chain intelligence. Hosted by food logistics and supply and demand chain executive. We cover everything from transportation and warehousing trends and new technologies to food safety and sustainability impacting today's supply chains. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on the Spotify, Apple, or Google playlist apps. My name is Brielle Jaekel, the associate editor here. And this week, we're talking about flexible warehousing with the CEO of Chunker, an online platform that helps those needing warehousing space in the short term find space that really fits their exact needs. We discuss how the idea for the platform came about and get into all the details about what flexible warehousing truly means for the industry. So let's link into that conversation now. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's episode. I am here with Brad Wright, who is the CEO of Chunker. And today we are getting into flexible warehousing. So, hi, Brad. Thank you so much for coming on with me today.
Oh, hi. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think this is a really important concept right now. Obviously, it's becoming more and more popular, and COVID has changed so many things about our industry. I think just the concept of warehousing in general is such a great topic right now, but flexible warehousing is really interesting too. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, me too. So fire away when you're ready.
Yeah, so I guess let's just start out. Can you explain what flexible warehousing is and really what the difference is between traditional warehousing?
Yeah, traditional warehousing is all based around long-term leases. And
Right.
so, somebody takes a lease and it might be 8 to 10 years kind of on average, up to even 20 years for traditional lease. And so, that locks people in and it's very inflexible.
Hmm.
And the short term, the flexible warehousing, really allows people to take that space that they've committed to and use it for other things at the same time. So, for instance, if somebody does a lease for a 150,000 square foot building and they lose a customer or they haven't grown as fast as they wanted to, they're still on the hook for the whole 150,000 square feet, even though they're not using it. And so they're paying rent on all of it, which is expensive, and
Wow.
a square foot, if you have 25,000 square feet extra, that's $25,000 a month that you're,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot. And so the flexible nature of it from the space provider's perspective is they can now list that on Chunker, just like Airbnb, and we'll find somebody to take that space on a temporary basis. And so from a person who has a need, it's the other part of the problem. They have a short term need. They have extra warehouse coming or extra goods coming in for seasonality or just stocking up because of all the disruptions. They don't want to go do a 10-year lease for a 6 month problem.
Yeah.
And so that's what allows Chunker to step in and say, wait a second, we've got these people that have extra space. We're going to put you in there for a few months, 6 months, a year, and then you can, pack up and go away when you're done with your project.
So how do you feel that flexible warehousing fits in with or kind of compares to micro fulfillment?
Micro fulfillment is what people use warehouses for. So they'll go into a warehouse and they'll set up a fulfillment center, which is receiving and kitting and packing and distributing, but they need the warehouse to do that. So if they
Right.
have to expand into a new market or if their other warehouse is full, then they would come to a flexible warehouse to set up that kind of distribution or micro distribution, try a new market, anything that they need without the commitment of a long term.
Right. I did a actually our few weeks ago our podcast episode was focused on micro fulfillment, and yeah, we discussed how important it is that big companies are now looking for smaller spaces in closer to urban areas and how that's really important. So I guess the flexible warehouse is the vessel that's making that happen.
Yeah, and by the way, they might be looking for a place that's a long term commitment for them because they want to be in that urban area. They want to be there for a long time. They're going to set up well because of the low vacancy rate and just the high demand. It's super hard to find those long term warehouses, especially in urban areas. So they don't have to let their business, they don't have to put it on hold while they're waiting for that opportunity. They can come to Chunker, get a short-term space that somebody's willing to effectively share with them, set up their operation, at least get going and get their feet under them. And then when the opportunity comes along for a long-term warehouse, they can just move over.
Right. So I know we touched on this a little bit that it's like super helpful with the shortages and whatnot since COVID, but beyond COVID, why is this so popular as of late?
I think that, both because of COVID and just the general increasing competition for everything, the companies value agility. And by being able to move fast into markets or move fast out of markets or spin something up very quickly, like they can do in a chunker warehouse, that just gives them, options they wouldn't have had otherwise. And so they love it.
Yeah. Do you think that there are any pitfalls or things that people need to watch out for when it comes to flexible warehousing?
I think the main thing is that these companies, they have to understand that they're effectively sharing other people's space, and so, there are some security concerns. There's ways around that, obviously, and people do it all the time. But they also have to understand that it's kind of like a hotel, where you can check in, you stay there for a little while, but sooner or later they expect you to check out.
Right.
you know, and,
Yeah.
and you don't have the option just to stay and stay and stay and stay because you're only there because they happen to have that extra at the moment, not that it's going to be extra long, long term.
Right. So you kind of have to incorporate that for sure into your policy or your strategy.
Yeah, you have to know when you enter that space that you have to leave. There's no
Yeah,
there's
right.
no long term option there.
How does technology come into play? I know we have your platform that you said it's kind of like Airbnb setup, but inside the flexible warehouse, booking the flexible warehouse.
Well, I mean, the technology is what enables it because if without the marketplace and all of the features that Chunker has to make it easy, people wouldn't do these short-term deals. I mean, they've always done them, but they do them with brute force, and they've been so hard, people haven't wanted to. And that's one of the reasons it's made, why we started Chunker is because the short-term warehouses were so hard to get and to do the deals. And so, the technology enables us to rapidly like aggregate the supply of short-term warehouses. It allows people to easily find without the brute force of just calling and calling and calling and driving around and, sweating bullets looking for space. And then it makes the deal so much easier because we
Mhm.
process all the payments, we have all the paperwork, we have electronic signatures. Now, in 15 minutes, somebody can do a warehouse deal where before it would have taken months. And because of that time, it really dissuaded a lot of people from even trying, especially the people with the warehouses. They would have just sat on it and paid the rent forever
Right.
rather than than having to go through the pain and suffering of doing the short
Mhm.
term deals.
But then how do in on the other side of technology, we're seeing a lot more warehouses adopt automation and all these, AMRs and these new picking systems. And obviously, we talk a big talk about it, but it's not quite as popular in every single warehouse around the world. But, they are looking more towards these greater technological experiences on the warehouse floor. But it takes a while to integrate that technology onto the floor. So how are they able to do this in the flexible warehouse, or do they just kind of like focus on the handheld and that kind of interface?
Yeah, no, it's actually a really great point. And, there's, when you're talking about flexible space, which, for the most part is anything less than a year,
Okay.
you kind of rule out certain use cases
Yeah.
for all those reasons you just mentioned. Like nobody can come into a warehouse for 6 months and afford to put automation in place and put all the warehouse management systems in place. And so that kind of limits to a certain extent the use cases that it's great for. But what we found is we have really two primary use cases. And the first one is overflow storage. So if somebody's stocking up, and things like that, they may have a lot of extra containers coming in that they can't put in their own fulfillment centers where they're doing exactly all those things that you just talked about. They're putting in automated pickers and they're putting in robots and they're putting in automated packing machines and all kinds of stuff like that that take a long time and cost money. So they do that in their main warehouse, and they use these flexible warehouses for overflow storage. And then as
Okay.
the room becomes available in their traditional warehouses, they just move it over.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's just the best use of the spaces that you have.
Exactly. So, because it takes a long time to automate and to put all those things in
Right.
place. And so, I mean, and it will get easier, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure we'll get to the point one day where, somebody can come in, run a warehouse for 3 months and pop in a few automation pods or something
Yeah.
like that, and be up and running.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing growth in installation time, especially since COVID, because people just wanted new technical services on the ground like right away. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
jumped pretty far
Exactly.
ahead. Well,
Well, a necessity is truly the mother of invention.
right, exactly. So speaking of, inventing and how faster it's going to be in the future, what else does the future hold for the flexible warehouse?
I think that really one of the big things that we're doing right now is also repurposing other types of facilities, specifically like vacant retail and things like that, so that we can increase the supply. Because as you know, warehouses generally are in very short supply. And even though there's this gray market effectively that has where the warehouses have extra space they haven't been able to monetize before, it still takes a while, and so and there's still not enough. And so with the retail, it's a whole new use of that space, which gives those owners options, because now they can generate extra revenue from being able to function as a warehouse rather than just a retail store, while they're working on a more long-term plan for that extra space.
Well, I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm excited to see where it's come in the last, few years. I think it's a great concept. I love how we're really taking warehousing and pushing it to the forefront of all these companies, strategies instead of it being an afterthought.
Yeah, when you give people options they didn't have before, you never know what's going to come from that, right? Because now all of a sudden they can enter new markets faster. They can take on customers they wouldn't have taken otherwise. They can get into new lines of business because they were always constrained by the space they had. And it was,
Right.
they couldn't do like these little experiments were really the heart of kind of an agile mindset, because they were just constrained, and they couldn't go do a 5 year lease to do a 3 month experiment. And so, yeah, I think it's going to open up a lot of options. In fact, when you think about the automation, if they have a current warehouse, they might not be able to try something new in that. It's just as easy for them now to go to get a warehouse from Chunker for 3 months or 6 months to try out new automation and new
Right.
scenarios without disrupting their other flow in their current warehouses.
So before we go, I'm running a little bit out of time, but I'm curious, how did the concept of Chunker come about? Was it needing this flexible space and having, issues, or was it just, seeing a need and filling it?
Yeah, it was. Well, the need came from a friend of mine who was a commercial broker, who'd been, had spent 20 years doing nothing but buying and selling and leasing warehouses.
Uh-huh.
And so in that time, the brokers always got the call, whether people had extra space or whether they needed it. And brokers hate that call,
Mhm.
because it's a hard problem for them to solve, because they don't have any tools. They don't know how people are using their warehouses. Once they do a 10 year lease to somebody, they move on to the next thing, and they never really,
Right.
and so it's a lot of hard work. They don't make very much money. They want to help their customer, but they don't have any real great tools. And so because of that, he understood this problem in great detail. He wasn't a technology guy, so he didn't understand the solution.
Yeah.
And this is my third software company. So, I mean, I could put together that solution, but that's how Chunker came about. It's just from the roots of that problem, coming from the perspective of a broker.
That's awesome. That's, it seemed like one of those platforms. It seemed like there was a problem like on the ground, and then that's so cool.
Well, as
I
we
love
talked
hearing
about
that.
it in the early days, this was 4 years ago. It seemed like such an obvious solution and such an obvious problem.
Mhm.
I couldn't imagine that there wasn't somebody out there already doing it. And it
Right.
blew me away. I went and actually did a lot of market research, and it's something I'm pretty good at it because I know that ultimately I'm going to be the one that has to compete, and so I want to know
Yeah.
who's out there, you know. And but I looked and looked, and I was just shocked that nobody was solving this problem. And so that's when, you know, when we came up with the name Chunker, warehouse sharing one chunk at a time.
Yeah. That's so great. Love that.
And just, you know, hit the ground running.
Well, I'm excited to see what more you guys come up with. I'm like I said, I'm excited to see where flexible warehousing goes in the future. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that with me.
You're welcome. I really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, of course. Till next time.
All right. Talk to you later.